but the interrogator argued that he had to find out who had attacked whom first. Bjorn knew for sure that something was wrong. There's an unwritten rule: don't question adventurers without solid evidence of wrongdoing, no matter what they bring. However, the man explained that the rules had changed recently. It was now possible to investigate rank 9 explorers to reduce attacks. Life is always harsh on those without money and power, so Bjorn concluded that they cling to anyone with no connections but plenty of loot. The investigator kept asking the same question, but the barbarian stood his ground. It's about the crossbow he managed to get after the incident with the marauding group. But he didn't say anything about that mysterious girl, because she could have guessed that she had encountered an evil spirit. Because barbarians always keep their promise. The investigator did not believe that the accused could survive a neck wound, and asked to demonstrate the scar. Bjorn wanted to point, but he couldn't find anything the vampire essence seemed to heal, but even old wounds. Bad luck again. Reluctantly, he had to tell about the rift, but the story of the vampire amused the man, because he couldn't have been on such a low floor, and it looked like the barbarian was just lying. Then Bjorn asked to call a mage to check his memory, but the investigator objected that only adventurers of the 7th rank and above were given such an opportunity. Bjorn was ready to pay for it, but the man argued that they would get all the money after his death anyway, so there was no need to waste it, but he promised to think about inviting a mage from the guild. On the first day everything went as badly as possible. 2 days later it was no better. The summoned 9th rank mage couldn't break through Bjorn's mental barrier, but the investigator refused to summon a mage from the tower for such a small matter, and she didn't want to hear anything about Raven and the dwarf. The man kept pressing the barbarian to write a clean confession, but to no avail. On the 7th interrogation, the investigator showed the communication stone taken from the Crystal Union and concluded that the crossbowman was not Bjorn's first victim. He reported that he had checked the unique number of the stone and received confirmation from the Union. The execution was to take place in 3 hours. Bjorn realized that the point of no return had been passed, and words would not solve this case. But he couldn't run away, because he would be wanted anyway. The only option left was to prove his innocence. Bjorn used Flesh Blast and broke the bars, stunning the sleeping guard. He tried to scream, but a kick to the head silenced the guard. The first part of the plan was done. Now he needed to get out of here. He took the keys from the guard and wanted to head for the exit, but the other prisoners asked to be released as well. Bjorn realized that some of them might have committed real crimes, but the innocent barbarian didn't care, so in a minute all the cages were open. The escapees broke through the door of the Adventurers Guild Hall, rushing inside. The guards asked the other warriors to help capture the prisoners, promising a reward, so a scuffle soon broke out. Taking advantage of the confusion, Bjorn stealthily began to make his way up the stairs. He realized that those who didn't even have weapons other than a few sticks would be captured sooner or later. It was necessary to hold out at least 5 minutes. The young man did not want to run away for nothing. When he got to the right floor, he found several guards barricading the entrance to the office of the head of the branch. Bjorn used Flesh Blast, and the blood that flew down got on everyone who fought, placing sacrificial seals on them. The first guard was sealed to the floor with a powerful blow. The second tried to strike the barbarian with his sword, but was hit in the arm, and the wound healed in the same moment. He didn't even have time to be surprised before he was sent flying several meters away. Bjorn felt the power overflowing. The effect of the sacrificial seal was simply superb. The guards didn't realize what was going on, as a rank 9 barbarian was standing in front of them. It was true that lower-ranked adventurers were locked in the branch, so the warriors didn't expect to encounter someone so powerful. It only took a few blows to knock out the remaining 2 opponents. The path to the branch office on the 3rd floor was now clear. He opened the door and entered, not even realizing that an ambush awaited him at the threshold. He did spot the man at the last moment, but it was too late. The blade had already cut his leg. The infiltrator was satisfied with his work, until acidic blood rushed into his face. Suddenly, a girl's screaming sounded in the room. Bjorn asked her who she was, but the wounded branch head ordered the barbarian not to touch the girl as she was the daughter of the regional leader. The wounded man even tried to threaten but was knocked out. The presence of such a high-ranking person changed Bjorn's plan. Now everything could become much easier. However, the girl insulted the young man so self-righteously that he even had to gag her with his hand. 2 more guards burst into the room, which didn't really embarrass the barbarian. He ordered them to bring the investigator, the leader of the Crystal Alliance, and not forget the mage from the tower, or the leader's daughter would be dead. Now Bjorn decided to counterattack. He went to the balcony and loudly introduced himself to the common townspeople and other adventurers gathered in the square. Bjorn then announced that the guild was trying to frame him, an ordinary researcher of rank 9, and swore that it wasn't his fault. He was sure that now this simple abuse of power would not be hushed up so easily. The man informed Raven, who was experimenting in the magic tower, that there was an urgent call from the guild. Some madman had broken into the office of the head of the branch. He threatens to kill the daughter of the head, and also demands that a mage be sent to him. The girl said that she was ready to go, because she was just about to find someone in the city, and she herself is interested to look at this madman, as she knows one such. But she had no idea who the madman was. When Alua saw Bjorn, she was furious with him for such a reckless act. The barbarian asked her to stop lecturing. Since she understood the situation, it was better to get down to business and use a spell to test her memory. The girl didn't mind, but said she would do it in exchange for one wish. The barbarian agreed, but asked that it be within reasonable limits. However, Alua could not test her memory due to the hard mental barrier. She asked if Bjorn had any artifact, but he countered that in this situation there was nowhere for such an artifact to come from. Resigned, he asked to at least visualize the memory. Suddenly, an investigator burst into the room and asked the wounded head what had happened. The man explained that the rebellion on the lower floors was almost quelled, but one had managed to break through. The investigator was also very surprised to see a familiar barbarian. However, the man said that this defendant insisted on his innocence and recalled that this was the investigator in charge of the case, and therefore asked what the basis was for the conclusion that the barbarian was a marauder. The investigator called the barbarian's objections nonsense, because they had seized an amount of stones that the adventurer of the 9th rank simply could not have collected, and the backpack was full of equipment, including the taken crossbow and the stolen communication stone. Bjorn countered that the testimonies of the Crystal Union members had not been verified. Then the head asked why the barbarian had not been checked by the mages. The investigator justified that the check had not been done because the accused kept lying, claiming a wound in the neck, although there was no scar, as well as absorbing the vampire's essence. The head was also surprised to hear about the vampire on the first floor, but the investigator kept making excuses, saying that this barbarian had an ability that blocked magic, and he didn't dare to disturb the precious mages from the tower. The man was sure that now he would definitely crush the hated barbarian. But Alua confirmed that Bjorn had indeed absorbed the vampire's essence. She explained that she had been with him at that moment and was certain of her statement, though she couldn't prove it with magic for some reason. The investigator interjected that maybe this barbarian just looked like an acquaintance of the sorceress and she was just covering for him. But Raven really didn't like the jerk questioning her words. She accused the man of abusing his power and feeling unpunished enough to look down on mages, but the investigator knelt down and tried to justify himself. The Mage Tower is close to the nobility and influence. They have many different factions, but together they form a strong brotherhood, supporting each other's interests. And some low-level investigator allowed himself to question the words of the representative of the Tower of Mages. The head asked to stop the altercation and said that if Raven was not familiar with the case personally, then everything that was happening would seem absurd to her. The girl did not deny it. After all, there were indeed no precedents with vampires on the first floor before. But these were not the words that the head of the branch should say. From the very beginning, the labyrinth was filled with mysterious phenomena and surprises. Anything could happen there, so the word absurd was inappropriate here. Bjorn marveled at his former battle friend's confidence. It seemed that mages were really on a whole other level, if they could even argue with the head of the branch. Suddenly, a stately man accompanied by 2 guards entered the room and asked Bjorn if he was the barbarian who had made the mess. The young man asked who it was, but realized everything when the girl he had taken hostage called the guest daddy. The man introduced himself as Neil Ubbins. Now Bjorn realized it was the leader of the region. The Adventurers Guild runs the clans, uses command spells, and sells various information for the convenience of its members. The guild's system of governance is simple. Each branch has its own head, and above them are the 13 district heads, and above them are the guild master. The 13 heads are essentially second in command, but there are some things that even they dare not do. Euban's guards threw a frightened man at the barbarian's feet, seeing whom the nearly became hysterical. Bjorn knew perfectly well who lay before him, Hearts Young of the Crystal Alliance. He reminded him of his false testimony about the communication stone. The man had tried to justify himself, but Alua had looked into his memory and informed him that he was lying. They wouldn't just shut this up now, for the representative of the Magic Tower herself had confirmed the false testimony. Euban's turned to Bjorn, informing him that all charges had been dropped. The barbarian released the girl and asked what would happen to the perjurer. The regional leader stated that the investigation would continue and then they would decide what to do with him. Bjorn advised the supervisor to also look into the clan headed by Jung. Eubens reported that he would have done so anyway, as the Crystal Union had been the guild